Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. I'm calling the show Vision to Vibe. Vision to Vibe. How do we go from ideas? We want to do something. We want to create some sort of experience or some engagement, some impact with people. To vibe, we actually created a feeling. We created something that did actually impact people, not just in a here way, but in like a down here way. So I think it's very fitting that you join me here at the beginning because you and I go way back in our creative careers, don't we?
Yes, way back, Nick. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to kind of delve into the past of what we've learned and talk a little bit more about the future.
People need to know. We've seen some things, Angela. And I wanted to also, I have my notes here. I wanted to also just be like, shout out that we've kept in touch. You
Right?
know, it's been you and I, to catch everybody up, have known each other since the days of HubSpot and HubSpot Academy. We've known each other since 2013
That's
and
right.
over 10 years. And you and I have kept in touch ever since. I mean, we've talked at least once a year, a couple times a year ever since. Why don't we like kick it off and just talk about something? One of the most fun memories I have creating and impacting people with you, which was the 100th episode of the HubSpot Partner Broadcast webinar series. You remember that?
Oh, wow. That yes, yes. I'm not sure I could forget it. I hope our listeners maybe have a semblance of a memory about it.
Well, to catch some folks up, but not to belabor the point, is you and I, when we were at HubSpot Academy, we're in the business of creating content. Sometimes it was live webinar style content or recorded content. At certain points, we were doing live in-person facilitated content. And one of the programs that I was focusing on with the partner team and enabling our agencies and services companies to be sort of an indirect sales force and like promotional and services force for HubSpot was we built live webinars, like a live monthly rally that I put on called the HubSpot Partner Broadcast. And I realized that the 100th episode was approaching and we wanted to make it a big deal out of it because, at HubSpot, we always try to find these like marketable moments, create a bang out of something. You're launching a new certification. There's like I said, a milestone approaching, or there's something seasonal going on. You got to make a moment out of it, right?
Right.
So you were not involved in the part. Let's back up just a second. Like you were not necessarily directly involved in my swim lane and that constituency. What were you actually involved with focusing on? You had a new interesting cohort of users for HubSpot that you had to create some training around, right?
Yeah. So, when I was at HubSpot, I was really focused on the HubSpot design certification and the contextual marketing certification. So, two very different types of users, and some of them happen to be partners too, right, Nick?
Yes,
Um,
that's true.
yeah,
They have
but
to
really,
design. They have to use data to make the experience change, the context. Yeah.
right, but really, drilling into what those users need from a learning perspective, and with those two certifications, a bit more technical than say, just using HubSpot, the marketing hub, in an everyday kind of way.
And you had to actually create some of that stuff from scratch as well. We'll put a pin in that. We'll talk about that in a moment, but we'll quickly tie off the 100th partner broadcast episode. One reason I think that we are friends and we've stayed friends is like you have a very strong like creative bent, like I do as well. You get stuff done in business and stuff like that. Obviously, very professional. But I think you've always had an eye for it. You need to have a little bit of this humanistic, entertainment, creative flair in what you do. It probably came from your time teaching people a lot of the creative tools and techniques from Apple, right? When you were doing the whole Apple retail experience, but you understood that. So when I was like, I want to do something special for these partners, create a bit of spectacle around this webinar and blow them away a little bit. And I approached you and Lindsay Tebow and others, and you guys were totally up for it. And we did like a musical, like we rewrote that song, 525,600. We did it with like marketing words, like
Words.
525,600 keywords and Facebook friends and all these other like references at the time. And I just pitched it to you, like, would you join in and appear in the background screen with Lindsay? We'll have like streamers and stuff, and people will have like signs. And we had like 10 or 15 people crammed into the webinar room, like off camera, who then, as I started this unexpected musical number in the middle of the webinar, you guys all sort of came out and joined me as my backup singers. And it was like crazy. And you could see the chat blowing up. People were like, what is going on right now? Like they just couldn't believe it. Um, and I just appreciate that you were up for that, you know?
Yeah. Well, Nick, I that kind of curiosity that you have is just infectious. Like having a workplace like that is really amazing to have peers that just want to try new things. So, you mentioned that I worked at Apple. Something that I want to point out with that podcast, we didn't have, 4 billion podcasts out in the world as we might today. So it was still kind of a new medium, and, you were like, "We're just gonna try it. We're just gonna try it," and I've always loved that about you. You just have this, curiosity to try new things. So, I think later on, by the time we had that 100th podcast, I had worked at Apple. I was like, "I'll figure out how to get this distributed," "I'll get
Mhm,
this up on some podcast channels." So, it was really interesting, and I also wanna say, despite our listeners that were tuning in real time, um, going off in the chat, in the office, as people walked by, they were not concerned at all with what we were doing. That was just kind of the office space, right? People there are
yes.
lights, there are streamers, like, no big deal, it's just Tuesday.
Yeah. You're so right. That's and I wanna pull that out of what you just said was it was the workplace too. And maybe it's worth it just pausing a beat because I know a lot of people respect the HubSpot brand. We sure as heck have and do now. And there was just something about the ethos or whatever of HubSpot that they were like, take chances, like pump it up, like take a shot. And that's honestly why I did it, Angela. I was like, this is a HubSpotty thing to do. Like it's my duty as a HubSpotter not to just let this moment pass, instead of just put a slide on there going, "Hey, 100th episode, yay." And it brought it out of us, right? And then it was so normal that you would do that. Like you said, people passing the hall would be like, "Oh, somebody's just doing a stunt to pump up whatever channel or whatever, segment that they're focusing on, standard stuff." And you also, called out rightly so, credit where credit's due. You helped us get that thing onto Apple Podcasts and stuff. That was a bit of a Byzantine, like, skill. Like you said, I think that might have been the 3rd or 4th, like, podcast feed that HubSpot was putting up at the time. What was that? Yeah, 2013, 2014-ish,
Yeah.
neighborhood?
Yeah, just go try something, figure it out. I will say today it's a bit easier to distribute,
Yeah,
but
totally. Well, look, let's get so cool. I mean, that 100th partner broadcast episode was just something special, and I appreciate you going along with me on that. But tell us again, take us back to people understanding what they can take away from your experience and our collective experiences. You helped create content for people to use certain features of a product that drove retention, drove adoption, and therefore drove the stickiness and the value and the ROI of that product. So we were creators at Academy, but creators to empower users to use software and stick around as customers, and therefore defend the revenue and the subscribers of a company. That's kind of cool. It's a business creative. That was what
yeah,
we tasked with at Academy. And you had a special task. I remember it was like, Angela, joining HubSpot Academy, new skill there, what we were all figuring out how to do that online. And then also new user class or a new user class we want to double down on, which is the designer sort of persona of HubSpot. Angela, you got to go out and understand these people and make a unique certification that suits their needs. How did you approach that? Can you take us back to that experience of, oh man, I got to start from scratch here, huh?
sure, Nick. I just wanna say, no matter what kind of content you're creating, be it educational, entertainment, maybe it is just a straight up advertisement, right? Just sales. Um, I don't really think that you necessarily have those engagement metrics in mind, right?
No.
The creator, the artist in you just wants to go produce content, right? Um, but with the design certification, it was really important for me to understand who those people were. I wanted to live, breathe, eat, sleep um, the way that those people do. So that really took a lot of time, obviously, through traditional things like intensive user interviews and figuring them out, as well as living the day in the life. So I do happen to have a BFA in graphic design.
Some
So
design chops over there.
little
Maybe that's
bit.
why you were well suited. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to, instruction, especially for adults, when you're able to step into their shoes and see what they're going through, even bang your head up against the wall in the same fashion that others do, then you can start to create content that will resonate with them.
Awesome. It's so true. The persona research, customer interviews, you can't skip that type of thing. Can you take us into any takeaways that might be relevant as you started creating the content? So you did the user research, you walked in their shoes a little bit, and you're ready to start making the content. Was there anything specifically or especially challenging you thought for creating content around maybe that particular type of product for that type of user? Like, how do you design certification for designers? How is that different than some of the other content and curriculum you saw us making for other users and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, Nick, I'll say to this day, despite having so many years of experience creating content, sometimes ideas can get away with you, right? So as I started scaffolding things out, I was like, oh my gosh, people are not, unfortunately, going to spend, days or weeks learning with me. I want to teach all the things. And I think, as I said, I still kind of struggle with this completeness or comprehensiveness that I want to provide. But
Yes.
that's just not how people work. I wish someone was spending all day every day with me, but especially, for anyone that's listening that's working in software, I hate to tell you, but you are not the only tool in your user's tool stack, right? Even if it's something as simple as, email, right? We all have to use email or an instant messenger. This video chat that we're on right now, there are other tools. So your learners are only going to give you as much time and space in their brain as they need. So I think just looking back on it all, that's something that I wish I had taken into account from the very beginning. Someone's, really just needs what they need in a moment in time to do their work. So
Very interesting, and I know folks here have created content before listening, but maybe you haven't created a certification. This was, you're right, Angela, a tension that we had because there was a dual tension. One is create content that helps users get stuff done in the moment, like you said. That made us even challenge ourselves to be like, does this even need to be a video? Isn't this really like help text in the app, perhaps? Like you had to think that way. Like, don't cage yourself in. What does the user really need? And yet we also have this mandate, this challenge from the market itself, which is we want to certify people. People want to be able to demonstrate they have some sort of quantifiable knowledge or competency. Sometimes it was around the software itself, the HubSpot design certification, or it was just a general best practice for like inbound marketing. So can you just again double click for us a little bit on that tension, take us back to how did we balance that? How did we figure that how did you try to strike that medium of like you said, it's comprehensive enough I can give you a badge for it and people could maybe know what that stands for, but also it's micro and practical enough that you just get in and get out. Um,
right. So, Nick, with the designers, as you might imagine, they want to be hands on. They want to tinker, they want to build, they want to design.
yeah.
And I think that's probably true of marketers, those that are taking, other HubSpot certifications, but that's not really where our mindset was at that time with the HubSpot Academy. So with the design certification, that was one of the first certifications where we had hands-on exercises and had a practicum to grade, in addition to some testing and assessments to go along with it. And to your point, it was something new, and it was okay. What if a million people take this certification, like some of the other certifications? How are we going to grade those things by hand? But it was just baby steps. So I said, "Well, that's a good problem. Let's get there. Let's get to, the point where I can't grade these, submissions by hand anymore, and let's scale when we need to."
I completely double down on what you just said there. I love saying that. Like, that'll be a good problem to have. Like, that's almost a relief to everybody. Let's create that problem. We should be so lucky that we have
Right.
so many people that. And by the way, it'll be a lot easier for us to figure it out and advocate when we have the volume, the throughput, the anecdotes, and the examples of the thing that no longer scales to talk about. So take us forward, Angela. I mean, your career that I followed is only partially what we learned and forged at HubSpot, right? That propelled you into trying to solve these problems again and again in other organizations. So how did you do this? We did one-to-many digital sort of delivery first type training and content, and you just talked about the challenges of making that certifiable, consumable, actionable, different personas, more hands-on. How did you take some of these lessons, and were there new challenges and stuff as you tried to apply this in other settings?
Absolutely. So after leaving HubSpot, I went on to Linkage Inc., which is now SHRM today, as you may know it if you're in the HR world.
Mhm.
And they are a leadership development company that work with a lot of executives at Fortune 500 companies. And
A little different than designers.
quite different, and as you can imagine, that experience was just very different from HubSpot Academy. It was not scalable, it was not one to many, let's conquer the whole world of marketing. This was, very intimate, small experiences for very high-powered leaders that are also super busy, I will say. So, I actually joined around the pandemic, a couple of years before, and, all of those experiences, again, were in-person experiences, and then with the pandemic, you might have, some ideas what could have happened with their business model.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
So you had to go with something that used to be all in-person training and facilitation, extremely bespoke to this has gotta be all be online.
Right. So, Nick, just a stroke of luck, I had some leaders at my team that allowed me to run with it. I was like, "The in-person experience is great," and we also had, larger conferences in person for a week long, but I said, there's a lot of power with, the virtual experience online. Let me start building something. We can test it out. They were like, yes, sure, let's go with it. So by the time the pandemic hit, we were actually in a good place. We kind of Legos, right? We were putting together modules, building out blended experiences. So some virtual components, in person experiences, and then all virtual. So we really had that flexibility. But again, the timing was just kind of a stroke of luck.
That's what you're telling us is that it just so happened that you were like, "I wanna bring some of this online capability and chops that I've seen possible at HubSpot, like, into this organization," and they were kinda like, "Alright, we'll explore. Doesn't seem quite necessary yet, but let's start to develop it," and then boom, it became extremely necessary.
Right.
Did you go
Um,
through a similar experience for how you designed it and stuff like that, that you described to us for the designers? You gotta go talk to some of these executives, like, how was the idea of, "I'm gonna make something now online, I have to, online for executives." How's that different, or was it, in terms of how you prepared for it and what you designed out of what you learned?
yeah. So with those executives, I found the personas to be even more nuanced. So, you can't just look at job title, right? The VP at this company versus that company in different verticals, they just have completely different needs. And then, of course, personality, right? We can't get rid of the individual and just lean on personas. So, I found the persona harder to pin down.
Yeah. I
Um,
remember our good mutual HubSpot alumni friend, Mike Redboard, said to me once in a phone call, he's like, "There's no VP persona."
Right.
I was like, "Well, you were like a VP at this other organization, like, what are you gonna do now?" He's like, "Well, I honestly, like, there's nobody looking exactly for me, and what I'm looking for is an exact once you're at that level, there's no exact formula for what an organization or you as that a VP might exactly need, right?"
Right, right. I will say when I was working with those executives, people had literally invested in those experiences. So I found the feedback cycle to be much quicker, much more robust. People were putting time and money in and much more willing to tell me how I can make the experience better for them.
Let's pin that down for the audience. So you found the fact that there was money changing hands, i.e., you're charging for this. You got a lot. Everybody got a lot more out of it. Like the
Yeah.
feedback cycles were just a lot more. And I mean, that's maybe not a surprise to all of us, but I think some of us have an angel on our shoulder going, it should be free. Look at HubSpot Academy or anybody else with the free stuff. Look at YouTube. It's got to be free. But you're saying if you design something that's bespoke for a certain group, first of all, they're going to pay for it. And if they do pay for it, they are going to be that much more engaged, bought in, and invested.
Correct. And then, we actually tailored and customized those experiences, for certain companies. So the level of personalization was much more robust. Again, kind of the complete opposite of what I was doing previously at HubSpot Academy.
What do you think the takeaways are for like our audience here as they go out with their own plans? Because it's really unique. You've got the spectrum of you've done it in person for people at Apple. We've done it online for the masses for free at Academy. You've done it completely bespoke for different executives and things like that. What are some of the contrasts or just like words of wisdom or warnings for those people who are going through saying, we want to create training content. We want to create maybe a certification behind it. Should we charge for it? Should we do it for a small group first? Should we do it for a large group? Just anything to advise people as they go into these strategy meetings.
Yeah, Nick, this is going to sound simple and perhaps cliched, but your users need to come first. There is no playbook that you should follow, live and die by for how to create those experiences. Because, at least for me personally, again and again, I've seen if I go back to the users that I'm trying to serve, I will create a different experience every single time.
Let the users tell you about it. And I would even say if people want to try a little bit of everything that they've learned today, a little buffet, is perhaps you take what Angela was talking about and you do sort of some free learning sessions from them while also value added learning sessions. So it's almost like the freeness is gathering the user input, sharing the feedback that you're getting as you do that. That's the free. This is what we're all about. These are some of the key takeaways. And then you can pull them into out of those conversations and stuff like that, maybe into something paid, or come back to them and say, as a result of the free exchange that we've been having around these ideas and learnings, we've got a paid thing that you guys can now go much deeper on, perhaps.
So, if you were going to build a certification, to your point, there really isn't a need to build out the entire certification, end to end and start collecting feedback. Um, Pick a course, maybe if, the introductory course, um, the end course, it doesn't really matter where it sits in the certification, but the sooner you can start collecting feedback, that's great. I know some people like to keep things close to the chest, right? Like we'll keep it internal. We'll do an alpha just with our employees. Don't be afraid. To me, if you don't have your user advocates and that advisory group, that might be a great place to start.
Huge fan of the sort of content advice, like user feedback packaged as content steering committee and advisory board. And those people become your first advocates for whatever gets created out of that as well. So a couple of takeaways you just heard from Angela, that one, and then also build out in the open and build it iteratively, like publish quickly. You don't even have to, I would say, Angela, don't even call it a certification, whatever you're doing first. See if the topic or whatever you're teaching is resonating, and then you can roll that up and say, yeah, that was actually course one of the certification. Here's the chopped up recording of it or whatever. Right.
Right. And, with your advisory group, Nick, this is not the marketing team. So don't just seek out your brand evangelists. You need some balance. So if I were looking for an advisory group, I might ask marketing like, "Hey, where's that customer that shouted us out on social or gave us a testimonial recently? Find that person." But then ask your support team, "What's
Yes.
the nastiest ticket we've gotten, this year? Where's that person that's really frustrated with what they're working on?" It's good for you to have that spectrum on your advisory board to really give you honest feedback, because promoters are promoters, and when you have those few people that really believe in your brand, your products, your services, your software, it sometimes you can do no wrong.
Right. That's true. And I think even the person who wrote the nasty ticket is a very invested user, one way or another. Emotionally, they may not be happy, but they took the time to see an issue through, to express their feelings. What's you could do worse than actually hear them out and show them that you're trying to solve it, and take that criticism and turn it into an opportunity. So, Angela, we talked a lot about HubSpot Academy and some of the work you did with Linkage/SHRM. Can you tell us about your role at Tapclicks? Because I noticed that you've gotten promoted there a couple times. You've been there for a few years. What's some of the work? How'd you find that, land into that work, and what's some of the things you've been working on?
Yeah, Nick. So I am the director of education and training at Tapclicks. And
Nice.
really, thank you. One of the main reasons why I wanted to join Tapclicks is because I saw that they did not have an online training environment. So I was super excited to build out an entire academy from the ground up. So that was really my driving force to come on. Now, we do have instructor led training. We also have a knowledge base that I manage, and I help our marketing team do a lot of different things like writing, creating content, developing video content, webinars, you name it.
You created a hub of know-how around the platform and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, are the users you're doing this all for drastically? Tell us how these users are different from the last two classes of users we sort of talked about. This two different personas.
Yeah. So Tapclicks is a marketing platform. So no
Familiar
surprises.
territory.
Yeah,
Comfortable.
no surprises there. I am working with marketers, but Tapclicks is a data platform and also has an order management system. So these marketers are working at a much bigger scale to manage campaigns. It's very different, especially from the small business owner that I encountered, maybe a single proprietor, right, that was
Mhm.
designing templates on the side.
Yeah, that could be HubSpot, right? It could be one
Right.
micro business, one person, 5, 10 people. Bigger too, but yes, definitely smaller on average.
Yeah. So at Tapclicks, my personas are much more technical, need to automate everything, and that automation needs to work, right? That scalability, they just need everything to work at light speed.
I find and that's amazing, first of all, that you were given that opportunity, but obviously you're certainly ready for it after years of doing this in your career to do that. But to roll out an entire platform, it's like, which one do you pick? And for the uninitiated here, we're talking about like a learning management platform, aka an LMS platform, right? That's a huge gamble, which one you pick.
Yeah, and Nick, between all of the companies that I've worked for, I've actually picked different vendors each time. So once again,
No
just
magic
kind of
bullet here. No, you're not calling out the vendor. This is the one. We're not here for that.
no, no, because the users, once again, just kind of going back
Knew it.
to
We got to eat our
our
vegetables,
users.
Angela. We got to eat our user feedback vegetables, don't we?
Yep, and that informs the tools that you pick.
So, did it work? Were there any sort of like maybe a takeaway or two of like, here's some things that you definitely do want to do, or something you might want to avoid in terms of that rollout, which I know, of course, encompassed a lot, but anything you could kind of summarize a nugget or two for us.
So when you are building from scratch and there is nothing, don't get overwhelmed. You really just need to start somewhere. Build a lesson, build a course, get that feedback going. And then, before you know it, when you really enjoy creating learning experiences and content, you're going to blink and all of a sudden you have, hours and hours of learning experiences for different personas.
Yeah. I mean, and you're bringing me back, remembering to use good like stakeholder management, project management. Like when you take in the feedback, like make sure there's a phase that you're taking in feedback and also internal feedback. And then like saying, all right, done with that part, feedback gathered for this iteration, gonna ship the class now, gonna ship the module now. Because what I found, Angela, and maybe you did too, is that if you don't do that, you kind of give others the right to fly in as you're mid production to go, oh, and don't forget this last thing. there's one more thing. And you're like, I'm in the middle of producing this now. Like, I'm already designed the jet. The jet is being built. You don't go in and add another engine to the jet now. Like,
Yeah, yeah, scope creep is real. You've got to figure out those points when it's a good time for feedback, meaning you are able to make changes. So, if you're 97% done and all of a sudden someone has this great idea, it might be too late.
I'm glad you said it was a great idea because it might be a good one. Let's not also, like I just did there, instantly defensively go, no, you're messing with my process. You're not as invested. Maybe not. They might just not be as connected and close to the product and so on. Back to your point earlier, they're just not thinking about, like, the users are not always thinking about our software. Your project stakeholders are not always thinking about your project and your phases and the goal and the scope and the mission. So we have to still have some generosity and some curiosity, even if people are trying to creep, maybe even inadvertently. Let's take at least the
Right.
feedback, capture it, shelve it, put it in the backlog or something, note it for future reference or to swing back around on. Totally. So what's in front of you now? I think it's nice for us to lead us off into the sunset. What's in front of you as a director of the training and the enablement and the education of your users? What's sort of something that you've got coming up on your plate, and what can we learn from that sort of day in the life of how you're trying to put that together? Did you say have some panel coming up perhaps?
Yeah, so we are having a webinar panel, just really kind of getting back to basics, some thought leadership,
Mm.
bringing together marketers from a lot of different companies. And, sometimes it's really valuable to hear other people's perspectives, right? Whether it's an executive or a company that you really appreciate and admire, being able to bring all of those people together and hear them, talk about marketing is, what I'm working on right now.
You're gonna have them do a bit of a debate, or are they gonna be sort of, just offering different perspectives? Do you expect there's gonna be some sort of either intentional or unintentional conflict around the topic, or
Yeah, I
you
think
keep it
there might.
spicy here? Panels have been done, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
They've been done because 'cause they're necessary and they're valuable, but, like, how do you try to make this one for sure, like, engaging and a little spicy?
Yeah, so people that have different backgrounds and work for very different companies, their day to day is going to be quite different.
You're gonna play to
But
that.
yeah, but when you're able to bring speakers together and see how they interact, you can find that spiciness that you're after, Nick. You can suss out the conflict that's going to happen when you have some time to see those personalities together.
There it is again. I can't AI my way through this, Angela. I actually have to spend some time with these people, maybe get them together in a prep meeting, pre-meeting, user feedback, input meeting, and then start to feel that out, huh?
Yeah, it's really valuable. Nick, we've had the pleasure of actually being together in person,
Yes.
but that's not really the way of the world these days. So I think being able to find that rapport and again find the tension when you're having these virtual talks is really important.
And it's doable. So, Angela, so many good little nuggets, like tasty little. I'm glad that we ended with some really good practical, tactical things. But as we know, as we learned and talked about a lot at HubSpot Academy, people will forget what you taught them, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. So can you take us to the mountaintop? If you think back, whether it was Apple, HubSpot Academy, what you did with linkage/SHRMs, like what you've done at Tapclicks, but anything around a moment where you were like, boom, that is it. That is a vibe. I planned for it. I organized it and I executed and I've gotten the feedback. I know that I did right in terms of what we described here. Can you just tell us about, it doesn't even have to be the best one, but a moment that comes to mind when you had a satisfaction that all the pieces we've been talking about came together on a particular class, particular certification, a feedback review. Take us into an emotion of that.
So, Nick, I think a lot of educators, if I think about a traditional educator in the classroom, maybe in K through 12, right? They don't necessarily get to see their students later on and how they've grown. And so I think sometimes when we are reading qualitative feedback, even if someone writes a beautiful sentiment about their experience, um, I still find that in-person experience to collect feedback, to be some of the most powerful experiences that I've had. Nick, I can tell you, I there have been literal tears with people telling me how they have grown, they have learned new things, they've expanded their business personally and professionally. They've just learned so much, and I don't think they were moved by the learning, but they were moved by their growth, and being able to hear that and see their expressions and how they have changed their life or their career trajectory is amazing to me.
Boom. Did you folks hear that? There's a nugget that just got dropped in the middle of the room right there. They weren't moved by what they learned. They were moved by their growth. Like that to me is what it's all about. Because if we're not doing that, then how are you driving an impact? Right. So
Right.
that is huge. So Angela, this has been awesome. It's fall, it's football season. So I know you've got a favorite cheer when you cheer for your alma mater. I just wanted to hopefully you do that for me one time.
I can do this right now, Nick.
You can, I hope you will.
Ah, Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. And where's a good place for folks to check out what you're up to next, and things like that? Should we look you up on LinkedIn? Can they find you there?
Yes, please find me on LinkedIn.